I want you to think about this situation. Imagine right now it's starting to get nice outside, and you're going to start going out regardless of this quarantine, or maybe the quarantine's lifted. You take your child out to the playground. Maybe you go out for a nice long walk. Maybe you get everybody together and you actually go down to the beach, or just for a drive because you've been locked up for so long. Imagine how nice that's going to be. Now I want you to imagine something else that could quite possibly happen. The unthinkable. While you're gone, somebody who's been watching and casing your neighborhood breaks in your house and steals everything. Or maybe you go to the park with your child, and while you turn around in conversation because you're so happy, a pedophile takes your child. How do you prevent something like this from happening? By preparing right now. Don't wait until things get back to normal. Go get Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and its 2 accompanying workbooks, and do the threat assessments on yourself from the attacker's point of view. And for your children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans are at teamlittlebigs.com. This is how you prepare yourself for then. Don't wait. Order them now. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and its 2 accompanying workbooks, the Threat Assessment and Defense Assessment workbooks. And for the children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans that you download for free at teamlittlebigs.com. Go check it out. This is Jonathan Gilliam on your favorite podcast, The Experts. And this week has kind of been a frustration for me. I've actually had people write me and say, man, you really sound like you're down. But I'm not down. I'm just looking at the predicament that we're in and the reality of what could happen over the next couple months. I mean, the reality that that things are, every time I turn the news on or I go look the news, I hardly really, to be honest with you, I hardly even watch the news anymore. It's like watching Saturday Night Live skit, no matter which one you turn on. But, you know, I look at stuff on the news and it's just unbelievable how, I mean, look at, for instance, this story comes from CNBC. U.S. grocery costs jumped the most in 46 years, led by rising prices for meat and eggs. Now, I know that there's demand for these things. I mean, people want, they're staying at home, so they're going to eat more. That's just the way it is. And meat and eggs and milk and bread, I mean, that's pretty much makes up the majority of what people eat, especially meat and eggs. I eat like 6 eggs every morning. So when I look at this, the other thing that I see here is that, this is at least what I thought when I looked at this, that people are still profiteering right now. I know people want to make a profit, and this is a capitalist country, and so people are going to make a profit. But what bothers me is that where the government is selling or giving away, trillions of dollars, they're printing trillions of dollars and just handing it over mostly to big companies and people that they know. I mean, this is the reality, folks. I did a poll on Facebook. I talked about this, on Twitter. I talked about this before. 65% of the people that responded to the poll had never received a stimulus check. They never got anything. And I need to redo that. That was like 2 weeks ago. Now, I've never gotten one. Not that I want it, but I mean, I've never got it. And I've heard of the other thing I've really heard that's really bad is some people getting it and it's getting taken away for things like, I heard one story where, I don't know. I just heard different stories. I don't want to get into too much of that stuff because I'll go down a pipeline there. But what I'm getting at here is that the money that has been given out, the trillions of dollars, and they're going to give out trillions more, is they're talking about a second round of $1,200 checks. Nancy Pelosi and Democrats are wanting to give out $2,000 a month for the next several months until this whole thing kind of stops, which there's no proof showing that it's going to stop within the next couple of months. But when I look at what's going on here, if they worked with farmers to not only help them, by kind of giving them money to lower the costs, or just regulating the cost. I mean, some of these, I'm not saying farmers are rich by any means, but there are companies that are getting very, very rich. They did a tally of the top billionaires in the world, and they're since this has all been going on, their wealth has increased something over $250 billion, I think is what I was seeing over the past couple of months, or the past month, something like that. I don't know where that story is. I just remember seeing it in passing. People are profiting off of this, and they're making money where I think in the time of crisis, if the government really wants to regulate something, they should be regulating the cost of these things. Rent should be, like, some people's rent's going to come up and they're going to have to renew the rent, and they're going to try to raise their rent. There's a lot of places where they're talking about freezing rent. I don't know how you can do that, because the building owners, they have money as well. In New York City, I mean, it's going to spiral out of control. And nobody's looking at regulating the cost. They're just printing money and throwing it out there. And here's what's interesting. We didn't take taxes in April. So that pot of money that goes into the federal government every year has not gotten there. And I know we're coming up here in a month or two. I don't remember if it's June or July where they're going to actually do the taxes. But there's going to be a lot of people, because they have not had any income. They've probably spent the money that they would have used to pay their taxes. And so, yeah, they took taxes out of people's paychecks last year, but there's going to be, the federal government's still going to have to give tax returns. A lot of people who are going to file, they're going to owe taxes. They're not going to have that money. They haven't been making any money. There's very few people getting paid right now. But yet they still print out the taxes. See, this is the way it works. I want you to think about this. Again, I'm not an economist. I've said this several times. I look at things in very rational ways. I think a lot of times people that are educated in certain fields make things very, very difficult to understand because they're speaking in their language. When I wrote Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, I tried to make it where I was as though I was writing it to my mom, so that she didn't have to try to interpret operator language. And the same thing when I made the lesson plans for The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. The lesson plans are on the website, teamlittlebigs.com, and they're not written in my language. They're written in the language of a normal person. And so it's hard to understand a lot of this stuff when I talk to people or I read these articles, and it's not written for us. It's written for them. But the way I look at our economy is that Americans have need. So they work. First of all, Americans work, right? They make money, and they need food, and then they want other things. The more money they make, the more things they can buy, but they can also feed themselves. Sometimes they eat out. A lot of times they eat in. They're really rich. They have a chef. But a lot of their money goes to food. They buy a home and they have a roof over their head. Sometimes it's expensive, sometimes it's not. They get a car because they have to have transportation, or they ride the train or the bus if they're in a big city. So Americans work and they spend that money on certain things. Across the board, it doesn't matter where you live. That's pretty much transportation, food, a home, and extracurricular things that you want. And that money, when they make that money, is taxed. And those taxes go to the state and they go to the federal government. And then when they spend that money, it's taxed. And that money goes to the state and the federal government. And a lot of those weirdo programs that they come up with. So the money's already being taxed twice. You get the money, you earn it, it's taxed. And then when you spend it, it's taxed again. Now, April 15th rolls up every year, and somehow the whiz-bang people at the IRS decide, okay, you get money back or you owe more taxes. All in all, I think this is correct. And I should have any comments on here, but it doesn't really matter what the percentage is. I mean, about over 50%, 56% of your check will be taxed at some point. And here's the thing about that. I mean, I may not be absolutely correct on the numbers, but the thought of how this works, I know is correct. People are not working, so they're not making any money. So the federal government can't take the taxes out of that money. They're not buying anything. They're starting to slow down in what they buy. And so the government's not getting their taxes that way. You see, bottom line, there's a relationship between us, the American people. And this is the thing about that I keep preaching about, the strength of the American people, is that not only does freedom require our involvement, that's one of the reasons why socialism has just springboarded onto the scene and taken over so many states, is because, and federal positions, is because the people stopped serving freedom. They started enjoying it. I'm not saying you can't enjoy it, but you still have to serve it. So the bottom line is the American people are the providers for the federal government and for the state governments. If the American people, if the citizenry stopped serving, we wouldn't have a military. If the American people stopped working, we wouldn't have taxes to fund the military. We wouldn't have taxes to fund the programs or to take care of the roads. We wouldn't, if the people didn't work, and if the people weren't motivated to be involved, the governments would collapse. But here's the thing. It's not that the people aren't motivated. They're probably more motivated now than ever to work, and definitely more motivated now to stand for freedom. That is for sure. But the problem is the result is the same, regardless of whether we're not working because of our motivation or we're not working because we're not allowed, which I find very strange. The money is not coming in, and the federal government keeps printing checks and handing out money somewhere because it's not coming to my pocket. A lot of businesses didn't get any money in those $100,000 grants and the loans or whatever they want to call them were coming out. Millions of dollars were going to, like, this one very, very popular prep school, or not prep school, but yeah, I guess it's called a prep school, private school that's in Washington, D.C. The Obamas went there. Chelsea Clinton went there. It's like $45,000 a year to go there, and they have 50-something million dollars in escrow. I think that's what they called it. But they got $5 million from that program. Harvard got a bunch of money. The steakhouse, Smith and Lewinsky, got, I think that's which one it was. They got $30 million. Sorry, my brain seems like it's kind of all over the place. Whenever I talk about numbers, my brain goes all over the place. That's why I've kind of got to turn it into a word problem. If Ron Bellum was still alive, he could tell you how bad I am with numbers. But there's no money coming in, and they keep printing it and handing it out. That's a problem. It's a problem because it's going to devalue the dollar, and the economy will not be able to handle this. If we don't go back to work, the government, the military will not be able to function. They will shoot all the bullets. The planes will start to break, except this time it won't be because of stupidity like Obama, where they just didn't fund it. There just won't be any money to fund it. And this stuff dries up quickly, folks. I was looking at the unemployment rate, and it was crazy. There was a GIF that has the graph on it, and it would go up and down, but it was always kind of centered in a certain area, and then all kind of like a heart rate. If you looked at the GIF, it didn't go much higher or lower than it typically would. A percentage here, percentage there, but it has skyrocketed to levels that we've never seen in this country before. And the thing is, it's not because people don't want to work. It's because their jobs are gone. A lot of those companies do not exist anymore. And so when I start going through the headlines, there's some stuff that just really, really just jumps out. And I don't remember if I covered this yesterday, but there was an article on The Hill about universal basic income and the end of the republic. And there's a quote at the end of this story by Benjamin Franklin, who said, and I quote, "When the people find that they can vote themselves money, that will herald the end of the republic." This is a scary thought, because a lot of these politicians are doing this because they know it's going to get them reelected. And we cannot sustain this. And a lot of people, quite frankly, don't want a republic anyway, regardless. When we look at, there was another story that I was looking at, SF Gate. This is off of the Drudge Report. San Francisco Gate, I guess, is the SF Gate is the name of the publication. And the title of the story was "Accusations of Socialism Have Lost Their Bite." In other words, saying somebody's a socialist isn't so bad anymore. And as I read through the story, a lot of these stories I skimmed through because, my gosh, talk about word salads. A lot of these stories are just on and on and on. This story in particular talks about McCarthyism. It talks a lot about McCarthyism and about how bad it was back in the 50s, that it scrutinized people for associations with communism and broader left-wing sympathies, as I'm quoting from the story. But its residual effects endured long after the House Un-American Activities Committee closed up shop. In other words, they're saying that it was unfair, and that people who believed in socialism got unfairly targeted for years and years and years, unfairly. They go on to say, they talk about healthcare. And of course, this is something that people always bring up, that when they want to discuss socialism and how great socialism is, they'll bring up healthcare and why we don't have universal healthcare. They'll talk about the roads, and they'll say how the roads are a social program. And the thing is, you can have programs that that are social programs. In other words, they affect society, such as roads. But you have to have roads. The reason why Germany came up with the freeway system was because Hitler wanted to make sure that his troops could get from one end of the country to the other and fight very quickly. And that's may have been the motivation at the beginning with ours. I don't know. But what I do know is that it's very important for the trucking industry, which is the backbone of the logistics in this country. It's very important for us to have good roads. Bad roads are unsafe. So, yes, it does affect society, but it's not socialism. That is not socialism. As this story goes on, they start to talk about a guy named Eugene Debs, D-E-B-S, and how Bernie Sanders, that's one of his heroes. Now, I saw something a long time ago on a show about this guy and how it described him. And this, again, remember, folks, this guy was born in 1855. He died 1926. And I want you to hear some of the things that this guy said. I mean, this is a quote. These are 3 quotes from this guy. All right, this is in the 1920s. The country had only been around for a little over 100 years at that point. He says, well, again, think about that, folks. Think about that. The country had only been around for a little over 100 years in 1920. And it was still growing. We hadn't seen as great as America could be. And it was still changing the world. Freedom. The Constitution like nobody had ever seen in the history of mankind. And this guy, these are 3 of his quotes. While there is a lower class, I am in it. While there is a criminal element, I am of it. And while there is a soul in prison, I am not free. These leftists never change their narrative. That should give you a little bit of understanding of why they're letting prisoners out and why they seem to just wrap them and cloak the prisoners with their love, or criminals, and how they have glammed onto the lower class for so long. Here's another one. I have no country to fight for. My country is the earth. I am a citizen of the world. I mean, this is only, again, a little over 100 years after the greatest experiment in the history of mankind began and took effect and started ending slavery in the world, eventually giving women rights, full rights, black men, full rights, white men, full rights. And yet his 3rd quote that they have listed here, the most heroic word in all languages is revolution. Revolution? He's already talking about revolution. The country was just getting going. The Constitution was just showing what it was capable of doing at that point. Yet he wants a revolution. These leftists never change their tune, folks. They never change their tune. In that same show where I saw him mentioned, I think it was on Discovery Channel. I don't know what channel it was on. It was a long time ago. It talked about how the Catholic Church in the 1940s, I believe it was, had allegedly had 1,000 communists, which again, there's not much difference between the communists and the socialists, but how they had 1,000 in their ranks embedded into the priesthood of the Catholic Church. And that's pretty scary, especially when you consider the current Pope. I'm not Catholic, but he's through and through a socialist. Now, you have to remember, folks, that socialism is it's not just economic. It's not just a social issues like roads and things like that. It's not just political, where Bernie Sanders says, I'm a socialist. It is a combination of all those and economic philosophy. It encompasses a range of economic and social systems characterized by social ownership of the means of production. It always goes back to the means of production and worker management. Now, if you have ever studied communism, sounds just like that. And that's because, for years I've been saying that communism is on the rise. After, interviewing several people who grew up in socialist countries, including my good friend Drago, who grew up and was imprisoned in Poland in a communist prison for being a part of the like a Freedom Underground there, and then came to the United States and became a Navy SEAL after he became an American citizen. Socialism is really the door that you walk through in order to get into communism. It never stops at socialism. Socialism, well, actually, to be honest with you, communism will never exist because the ultimate goal of communism is a utopia in which those in need take and those that can give work, or those that can provide work. And through this this dilemma or this clashing of different groups will come a synthesis in which socialism gives rise to communism and this utopia of the communal living without a government. Now, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, and by no means am I a rocket scientist, but it does not take a rocket scientist to figure out that people cannot just run amok, especially when you're talking about, in this country, 300 million people, and they're going to police themselves with the gangs and the drugs and the rapists and the narcissists and all these people that are out for themselves like they are today. And these socialists believe that eventually there will be a utopia in which no government is needed. And until that point in time, and this is the other thing that's strikingly odd, well, this is the great lie, is that we will give and coddle and take care of everybody while they give over their freedoms, they give over their businesses, and they give over the management of the days that they work and the hours that they work and so on and so forth to the government without any say-so in how they regulate stuff. They literally become your owner. And people that are existing right now that are seeing what's going on and they're wanting their freedom and they're seeing how this stuff is happening. Well, I mean, you got what you asked for because you stopped serving. And I know there's patriots that are going to say, no, you're not talking about me. Well, did you serve? Well, I believe in the flag and I support police officers and I raise good kids, and okay, that's part of it. Being a good, productive citizen is part of the service. But when you see the country going down a road towards socialism, and this has been happening, I mean, I just showed you in the 1920s, that guy got 1 million votes back in the 1920s when he ran. And that's who Bernie Sanders still talks about. You're not doing anything. I mean, I can guarantee you tomorrow and next week and the week after that, people are going to be sitting at home or on social media talking about how Fauci is a criminal and he's a leftist in government, which he's a leftist in government. There's no doubt about it. They're going to talk about how, the prosecutions are coming in D.C. and this Flynn case is the start to all these people coming down. And guess what, folks? In 3 weeks, while you're still hemming and hawing on social media and arguing about whether or not Fauci is good or bad, or the Flynn case is going to spark all these arrests, or and government and the deep state is going down, guess what? In 3 weeks, you are still not going to be at work, many of you. The country is still going to be heading towards a leftist slant. you are still going to be in a position where Donald Trump may or may not win in November, because who knows what they're going to rig at that point. You are still going to be in a position where you are not free to go anywhere you want. And a good chance is that that virus is going to be kicking up again here as people start to go out. But virus aside, while everybody's concerned about the emotional stuff that they see on social media, almost 100% of the population will not be out protesting. They will not be out. In every state this could happen. Every state, people with a mask, hopefully, social distancing. I'm almost giving up on social distancing. You go to the grocery store and people are all over you. That's just at the grocery store. But people are going to have to start doing things like they did in Virginia, where they surrounded the Capitol because of the issue with the Second Amendment. The people have got to get these leftists out of office, out of government. The people have to rise up and start re-educating the population on how dangerous socialism and how ridiculously impossible it actually is. It's never going to be ran by people who love and care for you. That guy, that one person who could do that, who could actually take 300 and something million people and run it without a government, was put on a cross over 2,000 years ago and nailed on that cross and died on that cross for your sins and will return one day. But right now, he's not the one ruling over this nation. The Lord's will and God's will be done, but it's up to the American people to go out and stand together with masks, gloves if you need them. I think gloves are good. Leave your children at home with somebody to take care of them. And adults go out there and stand for what's right. Stop bringing your children to this stuff. This is adult work, and you guys are not adulting. You're not going out and doing this. You haven't been doing it. It's been allowed to grow, and I'm not just coming down on you all. I tried to do this once, and nobody showed up. It was sad. It was very sad. To go against de Blasio for law enforcement on a Sunday, and everybody talked about all the cops and people that I know were on Facebook. Oh, yeah, we're going to be there. Nobody showed up. You know why? Because on a Sunday, and they were out doing other stuff because it was a nice day. It's time for the people to start standing up. You're going to have to realize that, or it's going to be taken away from you. It just is. And it may be slow, like a virus that's creeping around. Or it may be quick, like a snake bite. Either way, until the people get up and start doing something together, we're in very bad shape. And folks, it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of money to do what you need to do. People came from all over the country to go to Virginia to protest against their crazy leftist governor. 20,000 people standing there, many of them armed, surrounded that peacefully with a show of force and cleaned up after themselves. Every state could do that. Enough people could do that. You don't have to come from all over the country. Go to your state. And people always ask me on social media, well, how do we do that? Well, figure it out. I may be the voice that's crying out in the desert, but I can't coordinate everything for every single one of you. Now, you want to invite me there? If I can get there, I'll come there and support you. But people are always writing, trying to get me to clarify stuff for them. I'm no genius, people. I just put in the time and effort of looking this stuff up online and just determining based on my training and experience and really, to tell you the truth, it doesn't even take my training experience for a lot of this stuff to figure out what is crap and what's not. It's blatantly obvious now. You look at the judge, and I'm going to try to talk about this amicus brief. I think that's what it's called. Amicus curiae. I can't even say it right. Amicus brief. That's what I'm going to call it. But in the General Flynn case, I asked my good friend Paul Callan to educate me on that. He says, check your email. I just sent you something. It's a write-up, almost 800 pages long. It's a book about this. I got to have Paul on to explain it, because legal jargon baffles my mind about as much as trigonometry. I need somebody to tell me and explain to me. And I try to do the majority of research when it comes to this stuff, but when it comes to legal stuff, I'm not too keen on it. However, the majority of this stuff, like this stupid article that I read about how socialism is great, it was on the Drudge Report. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out how bad that is. There's another one here. Stanford Advocate. Facebook is quietly helping to set up new pro-tech advocacy group to battle Washington. Now, this isn't the first time Facebook has done this. What's interesting is, you know how everybody's always talking about how, and I've been censored on Facebook. I was censored this week. But my whole show that I used to have on there was censored big time. But yet, Republicans and Democrats and the NRA are playing ball with Facebook and setting up these types of groups on Facebook to kind of covertly change the narrative online. I find it very worrisome that these things are allowed to happen on a platform as big as Facebook. And I do believe that Facebook should be broken up, or it should just, too many people depend on Facebook right now for it to be not to be controlled by the Constitution. Listen, I'm all about capitalism. I'm all about free market, but Facebook and Twitter have gotten into a realm where they control speech and they control the narrative, and they can affect without changing people's opinions. Okay. It's not like they're going out and changing conservatives' opinions. They are purposely muting the conservative voice. And same thing with media in a lot of ways. This is one of the biggest ways that we get information from the government, or we get information about reality, about what's going on in the world. It's also the biggest, the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for here? It is the place where the majority of people in the United States and around the world go to exchange information and ideas, and it is censored. And I think it's gotten too big. It's almost as big as society itself when you step outside your door and people are saying, no, you can't say that. Because most people do get up, especially now that they can't go outside and talk. They go on Facebook and talk. And it's not just a picture or a meme that you post. There are people that have been booted or locked and put in Facebook jail because of something they direct message to somebody else. I've heard about that. These are issues that the people need to wake up to. Now, there was something else I was wanting to point out here. There's some things, okay, I've got to cover this just for a second. HR 666, HR 6666, there's an extra 6 on there. I don't even know if that means it's extra devilish, but it's basically a government surveillance program to follow. And when I say follow, it's not like they're going to be following you as you walk. Anybody who has had COVID-19 and the people that have come in contact with you. So it's tracing, but it's not just tracing of like making phone calls. This is where they trace, and if they find out you come in contact with a COVID person, you, if this bill went through, could be forced into a quarantine where they literally would have mobile quarantine places set up, and you would go to that against your will. That reeks of socialism. That's the reality of socialism. Just like in Michigan, it's not this happy-go-lucky, hey, the government's got it. I don't know if you've realized this, folks, but the government's full of a lot, the majority of people that did not operate in areas where they developed a really good mind for critical thinking. No. Majority of these people rode silver bullets to the top, and they have no clue what they're doing, but they're pompous and arrogant, and they think that they should be worshiped. A lot of these people, that's the way they are. Anybody that's worked in government, I know you're saying hallelujah right now because that's the way it is. Let me think here. Let me see what else I got here before I close this down. Now, color of law, still want to talk about that amicus brief and what's going on with Flynn. I want to talk about that. But yeah, I'm going to close out, and I just want to share with you something that I was thinking about earlier before I started the show. And maybe I'll touch upon this later this week or next week. But, you know, the American people and who we are, who we should be, is going to determine where we will be. It's not going to be politicians. It's the same thing that I keep saying about the president. He's the guy who turned the ship, as one of my listeners said one day, wrote me a direct message and said, Trump is not the guy who's going to dock the ship, but he is the man who turned it. It's the American people that have to dock it and bring it back. And I truly believe that. The American people have to get involved. It's not comfortable. But when you do it, ask anybody that's out there. Once you're out there, you come home and you feel very satisfied. It's like, you know, going to lunch after church. You know, a lot of people just want to go home, but you go out and you sit and eat, and by the time you're done, you go home and you're like, man, I've actually had a good day. I've learned a lot about the Lord. I had some good food, laughed. Now I'm home. I can relax. And that's what you feel after a day of standing up for what is right. The Lord made this place possible. God made this place possible. He made it possible for a reason. Because he wanted, and this is what I want to leave you with. He wanted you to be able to think freely. He wanted you to have a free mind. Now, I've had this debate with friends before about free will. And they say, well, if you have free will, why everybody suffers, everybody will feel death and see people die, they may or may not feel love, but there seems to be once you go through life and you look back in the past 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, you will say, well, that actually seems like it was, there were certain things there that were just meant to be, and I couldn't get around it no matter what. And I truly believe that death is like that. You cannot get it. The day you're going to die, it's the day you're going to die, no matter what. But I do believe God wants you to have free will. He wants you to live and choose and be in this world based on the will that you have created, and he hopes that it's in line with his will. But regardless of that, you are still going to come up upon certain milestones. It's part of the training process for the next life. SEAL training, boot camp, medical school, architecture school, anything that you go through, apprenticeship, where you have to, on-the-job training as as law enforcement, as a teacher, there's going to be certain things that you cannot avoid, lessons that you're going to have to learn. And the rest, and what happens is you get these lessons, you experience these things, and then, 90% of the time, you're going to have to learn. And then, 90% of the time, you're going to have to learn. And the rest, and what happens is you get these lessons, you experience these things, and then, 90% of the time, you're going to have to learn. And the rest, and what happens is you experience these things, your will is tested further, free will. But you will come back to this point in time and space where you will experience this. And you cannot, I believe that you will not be able to avoid those things. How you respond and where your life goes from there is your free will. And I believe that that is the way this is structured. We structure things the way God structured things. We know inherently inside of ourselves, instinctually, to mimic him. And that's what we do when we set up things. When we want to test somebody, that's how we set it up. And I think I've spoken on that. Maybe I will definitely speak more on that this week. But what's happening right now, I believe, in this country is that we are at one of those points where we have to make a decision. Are we going to stand together or are we not? Because I believe as a country and as a free people, we have the same will, the same free will. And that's why this country was created. The world has never been as free as it is now. But we're all facing these types of things. And I think there are points in time and space where in this country, we have to be willing to stand together against tyranny, against socialism. And we may have to make decisions as a people that we can't, and face the fact that we may not be able to escape this virus. There may be millions of people die, or maybe not. But we need to make those decisions together, us, not just some weirdo like Cuomo. Look, Cuomo's such an idiot. He took and mandated that elderly people with coronavirus could not go to a hospital. They had to go to an elderly clinic. The one place that they shouldn't be, because those people are the most susceptible to the virus. And that's where he sent them. Now they're backtracking, but they've also found out that his staff put things in the bill saying that they couldn't be sued. They saw what was happening. In Pennsylvania, the transgender person that's in charge of health, that's something we got to talk about one day. Is not saying, listen, I don't, whatever, transgender, whatever, but this person is odd and did the same thing that Cuomo did and mandated that people, that elderly people that are sick go to these homes, these clinics, but yet, interestingly, took their mother out, I think it was their mother or father, out of a clinic and put them in a hotel room. I think that's how the story goes. But regardless, they got them out of there. I just got told this a couple hours ago about this. Another elitist. Again, listen, it doesn't matter if you're transgender, gay, straight, black, white. Stupidity and narcissism and poverty, actually, to tell you the truth, they don't see those things. You could be the weirdest person in the world and still be a narcissist. I've seen it. You could also be as white or black, male or female, one leg, two legs, three legs. It doesn't matter. Poverty doesn't care. And nor same thing with stupidity. In fact, we're born with stupidity or ignorance. I mean, but in the first 5 years of our lives, we learn more than we will ever learn in the rest of our lives. We learn how to walk, speak a language. Why? Because we are curious at that point. We lose the curiousness as we grow older. But all of this, I digress a little bit, all of this is pointing to a place in time and space where Americans together have to decide, do we stand together or do we not? Because if you do not, then the government is going to determine where we go. And you can see where that's getting us. And that, my friends, is the truth. I'm Jonathan Gilliam, as you know. I love all of you. You're in my prayers. And I hope the best for this country. Listen, people write me saying, are you down? I'm not down. I'm just in thinking mode. You know, warriors have to pause every now and then. I did a whole show of that the other day, talking about pausing. Warriors have to pause. And one thing I do want you to be prepared for right now, individually, is that I talked about McChrystal and this app or this technology that they're using to go after Trump supporters and after conservatives online. I'm already seeing it. You write something, you get overwhelmed. And they're paying people as well to do that. So you got to stand strong there as well, or just don't respond. I often find it's best just to delete whatever it did and repost it. Come up with your own strategy. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. That's the truth. And this is The Experts. Peace. And we're out of here.